Japan, it was a really rich country, right? The second largest GDP in the world after the US at one point. 8 out of the top 10 companies in the world stock market were Japanese. But at the end of the 1990s, Japan's bubble economy burst. Now Japan is called lost 20 years and gave up its second place GDP to China. Then let's learn about Japan's economic bubble together. Let's take a look at why Japan's economic bubble burst one by one. First, Japan's bubble. When did it burst? It burst between 1990 and 91. But actually, it's very important to know where this bubble was in Japan's economy. It was in Japan's stock market and real estate market. Yeah, in other words, it was a stock bubble and a real estate bubble. So honestly, we can avoid stocks. Easy, just not investment in stock, that's it. But real estate is, after all, closely related to our life. One of the necessities, so it's a more important market. But even in this Japanese real estate market, there was a serious bubble. Then, how serious was the situation? First, let's take a look at Japan's stock market bubble. I told you that Japan's bubble burst between 1990 and 91. Then we have to look at the period before the bubble burst, about 4 or 5 years ago, from 1985 to 89. In that moment, Japan's stock index tripled in about 4 years. Triple. Wow, that was huge. For example, in 1988, among the top 10 companies in the world by market capitalization, 8 were Japanese companies. The only newest companies in the top 10 were IBM and ExxonMobil. That's it. Now we can see that no matter how well Japan lived, it was very strange. While other countries' stock hardly moved, Japan's stock index tripled. Now, real estate. Roughly speaking, the situation at the time could be expressed like this. If you sell all the real estate in Japan, you can buy the whole of America. Yeah, that's right. This is how much Japan's real estate market was overvalued. But actually, what we are curious about, then why? Why did Japan have a bubble? Well, there are 3 reasons. First, price rise, expectation psychology. Second, prolonged financial easing policy. Third, explosive increase in credit loans. The first reason why Japan had a bubble, price rise, expectation psychology. In simple words, I will introduce good to go psychology. Well, in the 1980s, Japan's stock market was rising a lot. Then wouldn't the Japanese government have noticed? Is this a bubble? No, the Japanese government rather said, rising stock prices, this is our skills. We are the best country in the world to make semiconductors. We have Sony. Yes, like this, the Japanese government did not see the situation as a bubble. Actually, the economic growth rate was good and exports were doing well. But Japan's central bank, Bank of Japan, was a bit different. They had some opinions within the bank that this seemed a bit like a bubble. However, since there were so few people who had opinions on bubbles, the Japanese government didn't take it seriously. So they just let go of the bubble crisis theory. But then, at this time, a book hits big in Japan. That book was Japan as Number One. This book was written by a professor at Harvard University in America in 1979. The content is how Japan became the second largest GDP in the world after America. How Japanese companies have unique craftsmanship, something like that. So, think about it for a moment. How could it feel for Japanese people? Once an enemy, USA, and then a professor from Harvard University, America's best university, said we have to learn from Japan. So Japanese people thought, wow, our Japan is really best in the world. We are really living well, really successful country. And they became more confident. So even if the stock market looks high or the real estate market looks expensive, hey, we're Japan, we can beat America. That's what happened. This is the first reason that created the bubble, price rise, expectation psychology. But to invest, you need some economic situation to back you up, right? Here comes the second reason why Japan had a bubble. Prolonged financial easing policy. This means, in a word, they keep the interest rate too low and for too long. Japan kept the lowest interest rate in its history, 2.5% from 1987 to 1989. Well, then everyone, when we look back at the time of Corona-19, our governments usually lower the interest rate a lot, so people who borrowed money at low interest and bought real estate recklessly. Japan in the 1980s also used this low interest rate of 2.5% to invest in stocks and real estate. But then, the third reason why Japan had a bubble, credit loans expanded. Originally, Japan was a country where most banks were very strict about lending money until the 1970s. But after the 1980s, Japanese banks started to lend money well. Why did they do it? First of all, Japan entered a low growth era. They recorded a 10% annual growth rate and then it was shattered. So companies didn't want to borrow money from banks. Let's just maintain the company. Why do we have to borrow money? And also, companies start to learn how to use the market. There is not only one way to borrow money from banks, but they can raise funds by increasing the number of shares or bonds. So they started to lend excessively for people. Like this, loans were easy and interest rates were low, then put it in real estate market. So real estate bubble was created by these three reasons overlapping each other. So far, we have learned about the cause of the bubble that occurred in Japan. Now, for the grand final, let's find out what burst the bubble. First of all, what burst the stock bubble was, paradoxically, the interest rate. Until 1989, Japan's investor rate was 2.5%, but in 1991, it raised it by more than twice in just 2 years to 6%. So people were like, what? Why is the interest rate so high? The loan amount I have to pay back has increased a lot. Oh, let's get rid of the stocks. Yes, from then on, the Japanese stock market started to collapse completely. How much did it fall? The date was December 29, 1989. And the average stock price of Japanese companies was 38,915 yen. But just the next year in 1990, the average stock price of Japan became 18,915 yen. Almost half of it flew away. Well, actually, that's not the end. It kept falling without an end and went down below 10,100 yen in 2001-2002. Next, real estate. Japan's real estate bubble burst a year later than stocks in 1991. The reason was that the Japanese citizens were very angry at the time. They were like, what's this? We are a rich country. Why don't I have my own house? The government should do something. So the Japanese government used a fierce real estate policy at the time. First of all, a complete ban on new loans for real estate. An NTB, loan-to-value ratio, which was originally 200% for loans secured by real estate, was lowered to 70%. 200% to 70% at once. The real estate market bubble also burst. This is how these two bubbles burst and Japan fell into a swamp of unprecedented economic crisis, as known as losing 10 years, losing 20 years. However, there are news that Japan started to recover this economic crisis. What do you think? Please leave a comment. Thank you.